and then like obviously they're going to ask you to show it. How do you prepare the code to show it?
All right. Cool. Welcome to Office Hours. I'd like spend a second or a few seconds thinking about something that you want to talk about, something you've been blocked on, and then we'll add it to this agenda.
I know I'd like to reword my question.
Okay. What do you want to reword it to?
What is the most secure way to protect JavaScript code? I know how to obfuscate code. What is the most secure way?
On the front end or the back end?
Client side, but that very well may be the answer. Now that I know about Node, maybe you put your secret sauce on the Node side. Not so secret sauce on the client side.
Okay.
That might be.
Did you have another question?
Yeah, and the other one was just like, first of all, picking projects you might want to list in your resume, and then how you would note the things that you did. And then also like how you, obviously they're going to ask you about the code. So like, how would you point them to that, you know?
Okay.
Yeah.
What was the second part? So the first part was listing the projects?
Yeah, and then like if you wanted to be able to sample those projects, like how do you show the whole project? Do you just use a code snippet? Like how would you submit it?
Okay.
You have to describe what you did.
Adam, did you have something?
Yeah, I just want to know what exactly will be in the phase 4 pretty much. So everything that we're covering this in the phase 3, that's all going to be in the phase 4, correct? Interview?
Some of it. I wouldn't say all of it.
Oh, okay.
We can talk about it.
Sure. So the thing I'm stuck on the most is deployment still. But if we're gonna have a talk about that some other time, then it doesn't need to be here. The other thing is, I guess I'm just looking at like LinkedIn and stuff. I'm wondering, just kind of, if I want to work for a company, do I reach out to them, say, hey, I'm graduating in a couple months, blah, blah, blah. And like, if I know the technology that they use, is it kind of pointless to reach out to them and say, hey, how do I set myself up to be interviewed here when I obviously know that you guys use Python, for example. I don't know any Python. Like, is that beneficial at all? Like kind of like that, right? Like how to set yourself up. How do you position yourself successfully as a junior dev, I guess? Yeah. So I guess it's building off of.
Okay, we can talk about it with Jeffrey's question.
Yeah, it's kind of building off of that.
Cool. Ben, Jason, I guess, have anything? Steve, anything new?
I'm sure I'll have some in an hour.
What is Express?
I'm just kidding.
Okay, cool. So if anyone has anything, just feel free to interrupt me and we can add it to the agenda. Okay, so the first one, what is the most secure way to protect client-side code? So this is kind of what we spoke about, I think it was Thursday, with the module pattern, where if you have some sort of a variable and you want it to be hidden from the outside, but you still want to have your functions access it, you're basically creating a closure. And the data is not, cannot be directly changed by anybody outside.
Oh, no, I don't mean about that. I mean about if you have proprietary code and you don't want it snatched or re-engineered.
Yes.
That's not.
So if you have any proprietary code, you shouldn't be putting it on the front.
Okay. It should be on the service.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So
that makes a lot of sense.
So it doesn't necessarily have to be JavaScript on the back end, right? Like, so you could have like just an HTTP service, and the front end just like makes a call to the back end. And the back end does like some whatever proprietary business logic that it needs to do, and then responds with some sort of answer.
Okay.
And the front end
just kind of a dumb client.
Okay.
Actually
so using HTTP as a way to like call out your functions in the back end.
I just thought of another one to add.
Okay.
if we get to it, like how would you incorporate, like where would you incorporate like a model?
So before you do that, are we good with that? Did that make sense?
Yeah, that actually makes 100% sense.
Did everyone get that?
Put all the secret stuff on the server.
Yeah.
It seems like there might be times when it's not possible. Like,
What's not possible?
have your job, to have your code on the server.
You mean
there's things that need to happen in the browser that you think are valuable?
Sure, but like, is that proprietary though? So anything that is in the browser can be like downloaded by. You can download the JavaScript.
Right. So there's no real way, like he mentioned, obfuscating it. So you can make it so it's really hard to read or something.
Sure, you can do that.
But it's still possible to reverse engineer it.
Mhm.
Probably.
Yeah.
So there's no real good way to make it totally secure.
Yeah, like I would say like UI and like any of the UI code, I would imagine it to not matter that much. But you don't want to be putting like any sort of secrets in there. You do not want to be putting in any code that you have IP over.
So just to clarify, like when we incorporate, like I'm just thinking from this, incorporating client-side rendering and server-side rendering, it doesn't matter, right? Client-side rendering still just gets information, but the business logic is still on the server.
Sure.
Right? Okay. It just gets like an object or
Sorry, you're
JSON or
making HTTP calls to the back end to the server,
Uh-huh.
And that has all of the data in there. So the front end is just used for painting the page. It doesn't have any information about what the page contains. That information lives in the server.
Always.
I mean, depends on your app. You can cache some of the data in the front end, and it can use that. But yeah, on most apps, it's you're making calls to the back end.
Okay.
If you wanted to protect how you do something, or how you get to a certain data, you do that on the server. And then you just say, what is the answer? Here's the answer.
So think of it as like a remote function call. Any HTTP call is like a remote function call. The function is defined on the server, and you want to execute it from the front end, right? So you make an HTTP call to say, here is the function I want you to call, and you're associating that URL with that function, and passing in the data that the function needs in order to execute correctly.
It's your API, whatever, right? Like API, you have access.
Say that again?
It's just like whatever your route, that route you hit on your API, it's just, it'll give you a specific thing.
Right. That route is going to be associated to some function, and that function can do whatever it needs to do. But you have to make sure that the function is getting all of the information that it needs, either from the user, I guess only from the user. Right.
Have you seen people build any kind of logic like with jQuery that's like maybe like they spit back all this data, but they use jQuery or whatever to categorize it? Like there was some advanced logic there.
To categorize it, what do you mean? Can you say more?
Like that just filtered. It just filtered the information on the front end.
So when you say filter, you mean like call like array.filter on it?
No, like you get a bunch of data and it like was you made some jQuery that was smart enough to like parse it and separate it into different categories.
Yeah, you can do that. So you can have like front end code, which is like all it does is it makes a call to the back end, gets a bunch of data, and then based on what data it gets back, you could have, let's say you have like a table on the front end where you want to like filter some, and you have like some sort of search options, and as you're typing stuff, it automatically like collapses like the data which matches those search terms. That is like front end logic.
Oh.
But that isn't. I would imagine that to be proprietary because it's just like everybody does that.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. But the data may be proprietary, which is why you don't want to like cache all your data on the front end.
I have this question. I'm not really sure how to form it. Okay, so if you have sensitive information in your database, I understand that you put like the connection string and the password to the database in your .env file, right? In your private .env file on the server.
Mm-hmm. Well, the .env file is just for development.
Just for development. Oh, for production. I'm just trying to understand how is production data.
So the way, yeah, that's a good question. Okay, let's just write it down. So that
Yeah, it could be another one.
How to
Protect production data, I guess.
Production, basically config, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I have a okay understanding. I just want a little bit more clarity.
Okay. Jeffrey, did you have another question? You were talking about something and I.
Oh yeah, I was just gonna try to add it to the list. This is like real far off, but like the model generated from like machine learning or whatever. I was like, how would you incorporate like some generated model in your application? Like where would it go?
Okay. It's basically gonna. Okay, I mean, you can talk about it.
Yeah, it's like another filter. Right? Yeah, somewhere in here.
Because if you have an algorithm for machine learning, that's valuable for private.
Okay, so this is good. This one.
Yes, thank you. Strike through.
So this was from the last time. Is this still hold? We answered this one. So picking projects to list on your resume. So I would pick projects which are somewhat complicated, like which have a few features in them, and code which you are proud of. So when I say that, I mean like it's got all of the things that you consider important, right? So you're basically showcasing what you think is cool or you think is good quality. To make sure like code has like tasks, it's deployed somewhere, it follows like good coding standards. Yeah, like something that is like maybe you worked on a team, and you worked on like some sort of a cool feature. You created like a cool UI. Something that you can show to somebody.
Well, I just mean, I guess in the context of what we're doing here, I get that much. Like,
yeah.
But what, out of what we have here,
right.
What would you showcase and how?
You're talking about like.
So I would say like the stuff that you work on before, which is apprenticeship, where you're actually working on open source project features. You're working on like internal production things. Those are the kind of things you can show off.
Well, like if you did interview app, for instance, like what code snippet would you show? Like that thing is in, you know what I mean?
Something that you did. If you look at the commit history and find by your commits, the commits that you pushed would be yours, right?
You can pin commits, or
yeah, you can go to like the contributors in GitHub and see your commits. Oh, you're saying
yeah, no, just like to showcase them, so it's just like an easy click or something. Okay.
Get blank. So,
oh.
And also in your resume, you should, as you were saying, like you would describe like the different projects you worked on, and you would describe the parts of the project you worked on. So the interview app, for example, is like a pretty large project, but you can be like, oh, I implemented this specific feature in the interview app. Right?
Oh, well, I guess the big issue here is if you worked on it and you were working in a team, how do you grab the commit, or you just grab the one that both your names are on? Like, how do you legitimize it?
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, so long as you can explain and defend the code, and I think it's fine.
Okay. Yeah. Lucky we might end up with one or two.
But I would also say, like, I think like the question you were asking me in the morning, which was like, given that you worked on this project, it would be cool to list the different technologies that you worked on. So each project would be like, oh, the stack was Node, Postgres, React. That way you're sort of listing like the different technologies in each project.
Oh. Okay.
So somebody could just look at a project and be like, oh, cool, you worked on React, so tell me something about React. You know, like instead of like, you're giving them information about questions to ask you, and you are only listing things that you're good at.
Oh, okay.
So it gets, so they're gonna stick to asking you questions from the context of whatever you're listed. So, right?
Universe relevant.
So, as opposed to just like writing, oh, I work on an interview app, and now you select them something about like, you know, an algorithm, for example.
Makes sense.
How's that doing?
Oh, it's fine.
You just have something, Jen?
Like, okay, so for example, I guess this is still like on the job thing. So a lot of the jobs I'm looking at, I'm looking for Python experience because I'm trying to go into like the product, some industry basically that uses Python and Node on the back end, both of them. However, I don't have that much experience with Python. So if I contact them and say, oh, I'm interested in this, how do I set myself up? I already know their answer. It's going to be learn Python, right? So so is there any point in doing that, or?
I would pitch myself as a person who is a learner, right? Like you can be like, I'm a voracious learner. I can learn any programming language. I just need to like, you know, I understand programming. I understand the different programming concepts, and it's just a matter of a few weeks before I can pick up Python. So you're selling yourself as an awesome programmer. You're not selling yourself as a node engineer.
Okay.
You see the difference?
Yes.
So what you'd like to showcase is like that you're adaptable, you can pick up things, you understand the concepts rather than the technology. Those are the kinds of conversations you should be having.
So is it out of the ordinary for someone to apply to a job like that says, oh, we use Python, or we want, you know, experience in Python, and you say, oh, I don't know Python, but I've done Node.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah, that's totally fine.
That's totally fine.
Yeah.
Because it just seems like it's not the skill that they listed.
Yeah, that's fine. You're gonna take a few weeks to ramp up anyway. It's not like you're gonna come on to day one and you're just gonna be like, I'm ready to like start working. You're gonna be like, you know, learning about the code base. You're gonna be learning about the different systems in their you know, infrastructure. That's gonna take a few weeks. So while that's happening, you can like work with somebody, pair program with somebody, and like ramp up on the programming language that you're using.
Okay.
So Python isn't super different than like the basic ideas are the same.
Yeah.
You have functions, you have arguments, you're calling them. So and the way you design them is the same. You have like modules. You're splitting the code into like different pieces. All the things that you're doing in Node, you're going to be doing in Python too.
Yeah, it looks very similar too, but it's just like, oh, I don't know any tools, for example. I mean, it probably shouldn't be too difficult to find, but so don't necessarily, like if I want to work for a company that does Python, I don't necessarily need a Python project, I guess. Yeah, okay.
Jeffrey mentioned that if you're worried about, like I was worried about listing, trying to have the minimum on your resume so you can even get seen, like you could also list technologies you're interested in.
Oh,
you know
that's
I mean?
good.
And then just say, I'm currently studying this, and this.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good idea. Yeah, I would say like don't think that you're only like Node programmers.
Okay.
You're programmers, and you can learn any language.
I like that. Okay. Yeah. That's fine.
How's this doing? Information about P4. So I would say like P4 is kind of what we've been doing. You know, authentication, authorization.
Will there be testing too?
Maybe. But like I would say there's definitely a pair programming section in P4, right? So you're gonna be talking through some of like how would you test this, or how would you I don't know. I'm not exactly sure of what SJ would ask you, but I would say like, you know, as a programmer, if you want to be good in like P4 and want to like succeed in P4, testing, authentication, you know, designing your code and structuring it such that there's separation of concerns, using some sort of MVC pattern where you see fit, those kind of things are going to be good. Yeah, and also pairing, right? So communicating with while you're speaking and pairing with somebody else, communicating your ideas, getting to clearly explain your thinking behind certain decisions that you made. All of those things are going to be useful. Yeah, I couldn't obviously specifically tell you what the challenge is. It is create an app called Facebook.
Create as much Facebook as you can.
In 2.5 days.
Yeah.
You can do it.
All right, so production config. Production config and environment variables. So have you heard of this thing called 12-factor app?
Yes. Pokemon. 12-factor.
Oh, I heard about that. That's the stuff.
So that's basically one of the design principles for using environment variables. I guess. Okay. So there's basically 12 main ideas which you use when you want to design your application. And the 12 factors are having revision, which is using something like Git, right? Having dependencies, which means if your project depends on different libraries, having a way to be explicit about what the dependencies are, and then being able to rebuild your current environment by just running one command. So kind of like npm install. Third one is more interesting, the one that we were talking about, which is storing config. When I say storing, and this is specifically storing config in the environment, which means using environment variables. And why this becomes important is, at least from this perspective, is that when you have it in your environment variables, it's very easy to override them. Environment variables can be very easily overridden. So, do they have more information here? So there's many so for example, the .env package is a package that helps you read a file and then add it to the environment variables. And when you are deploying to production, all you have to do is specify an environment variable which is special for that specific config. So in the case of, let's say, database host, and let's say the database name is exactly the same. Let's say the port is exactly the same, only the host is different. So if we were to split up our database config into the host name, the DB name, and the port, 3 different things, you can just override one of them and say now the host is instead of localhost, it's now something.production.com or something, right? So that basically gives you an easy way to manipulate where you are currently deployed to.
I get that there's a way to separate them, but is there a structured way that you, or a design style that you should follow?
Right. So how you're doing your local development continues to be the same. You have a .env file, it reads it, and that only happens in development. You don't read a .env file when you're in production, for example, right? Right. So have you ever looked at Heroku?
Yes.
So when you have your apps in Heroku, so let's see. So for example, so let's say we're here. So there's like all these environment variables. I don't want to show it to you because it's like a, but like you can have things like this. But you can just override things. And this will be just based on like the environment you're in. And this automatically displaces, this is for the production app. This is configuration for the production environment. So when you click on deploy, it's automatically going to use those configs that have been set in the settings here.
Okay.
And these config variables have to match whatever your application expects. Right? So if your application is using process.env.database URL, you have to make sure that that is exactly what is added here. If you're using .db name, then you have to make sure that that's added here.
I guess what I'm getting at is just like a standardized way to just have it set up in a project, because you're gonna have these environments every time you develop. Like there's a standard way that is written out.
Yeah, so you use you create a .env file, and then you list all of the environment variables that you need in your application in that file, and that file doesn't be checked in. So yeah, we can do like a
like where the different config files go, and that stuff.
Yeah, we can do a live coding session. I know I've been talking about this. We can do it tomorrow. But what you would do is you want to like hide the environment from other people. That's the intention. You want it to be secret, right? So that way it's not checked into your code base.
So I guess my question is, what is the database string, right? The connection string to like links to your database, right? And also the password to that database, right? Is that accurate? Tokens, I guess.
Yeah, like your client ID and your client secret. Let's say you're doing OAuth, right? So for your OAuth, you need like the client ID and the client secret. The two sort of keys. Those are going to be secret too.
What happens? I guess my question also lies around if your app is in production, it has those things. What if someone, I don't know, tries to create their own user in your database with like an admin role? Yeah. Is that like possible? Because I don't know.
You're saying if a user hacks into the system, can they get the environment variables out?
Or can they could change the data? Like it seems like a common role would be admin, right? So why don't people just hack into?
I mean, there should be a way, firstly, in your application for somebody to create an admin user. If there is, then that's bad. And secondly, can an admin user do anything other than just like, change a database? I don't think they can, right? They can only like change the database. They couldn't potentially go and like delete everything. They can delete everything. They can delete your database, but they can't go in and like change like your config variables, for example.
Yeah.
Because that lives on a different level.
So what's stopping people from going and getting all of the information from our database? Like because the connection string is a secret, they don't know where the database lives.
Right.
Yeah. Okay.
Exactly. I mean, and also they don't have the username and password, right?
Yeah. Okay.
So there's many ways to secure your app. The first way is like using like your application layer, where you make sure that there's no way for somebody to hack into your system and like manipulate their role and make it admin. Right? Like, so if let's say you have different roles in authorization, you will have to make sure that people cannot like just change their role.
How?
You use authorization.
Authorization.
Right. So you can only change your role if you're authorized to do it.
Okay.
Right. So once you're authenticated, remember we spoke about the difference between the two?
Yeah.
So you use authorization to do that. So you always check to see if the current logged in user has the privileges to do what they're trying to do, or has access, basically. And then the second thing is to make sure your environment variables are all safe and secret, so that no one.
I guess is there No, never mind. Is there like a way to have like a password, like an admin password where like, only like I don't know. Never mind. I understand the basics, but I want it to be like understand more security.
Mm-hmm.
But I think I just need to play.
So there's definitely more levels of security that can happen, and that comes like as you get more into like deploying and DevOps and all of that.
Mm.
So for example, like your database right now is completely exposed to the whole world, right? Like I can connect to your database if I know the credentials.
Mm-hmm.
But like in the real, like in like larger applications, that's usually not what happens. Usually the database is in like its own private network. And within the private network are all the servers that are talking to the database. So only those servers can connect to the database. It's not like anybody from the outside can connect to the database.
Oh, I see.
So that's another layer of, it's called VPC, which is like virtual private something.
Network.
That's not a VPN, it's like VPCs, containers, yeah.
Oh.
So you would do things like that.
So like for like an app where you have like an admin user that is gonna like say grant like pass out more permissions, like would you have like another dashboard that or admin that is able to give out permissions where they can kind of like pick people that they want to change it, like you would give like a new user just like this default credential that's like a basic level, and then like give like an admin would have to be like, okay, this person can now change their credential to something else, so that like a dashboard thing that you would
Sure.
like build into like an admin user's like profile or something like that.
So the admin user can potentially do anything, right? That's why they're admin. But then the user, so that means your application would have like roles, or rather like every action would be sort of, would have associated roles who can perform the action. If every action is sort of like categorized that way, then you can like say, oh, is this current user have access to do this particular action?
We only need to do that for users that.
For every user,
Yeah.
right? Even if you're admin, might as well do it. But an admin.
Well, I'm also thinking like if you're not logged in and you want to explore a site,
yeah,
then you wouldn't make those checks for those routes.
You could.
You go into.
You could be like, you could have another role which is like not logged in.
Oh. Okay.
Right, or something like that, where you're like a guest user or something like that, where there isn't like an entry for that user. But you're still you're calling the same function. You want to have like one abstraction, which is like, do I have access?
Uh-huh.
And that function takes in some argument, right? Saying that my current role or like, am I guest or something? And that function returns true or false. You have access. If it's true, then you're good. If it's false, then you cannot.
Oh, that's easy. And you just put that just middleware everywhere. Okay.
But you have to make sure that the arguments that is being passed to this function cannot be hacked.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So for example, if the function is, do I have access? And it takes in like a role, the role shouldn't be something that the user can pass in as arguments. Right? That way then it's prone to hacking.
Yeah.
The user can change something and then pass in like an admin role. So you want that thing to be like internal, that value coming out.
And also,
Could it be referencing that? Yeah.
validation. So if somebody's putting something in should be submitted in your database, that shouldn't be there. It can reject it.
Yeah, for sure. You should be definitely doing like, have you heard of cross-site scripting and like, in protecting SQL from like injection attacks?
Heard
Stuff like that.
Not.
Okay. So those are things you can read up on too. There's one more thing I wanted to say.
Can I make a suggestion for next time?
Mhm.
Can we go with SQL injection?
Okay. Although it's not in the list of skills, but yeah, that means I'll have to add it. That, and also I wanted to talk about migrations. SQL migrations. I think that's more important. Oh yeah, I wanted to add about, does everyone know what SSH is?
The thing that you shake and you draw the picture is X.
No, SSH.
Oh, no. Oh.
It's another way to connect some kind of protocol.
Yeah, it's a secure.
It's a secure shell, right?
Oh, okay.
That's what so SSH is shell, SSH is a secure shell. Just like, has anyone used SCP? It's like, so it's like secure copy. So you want to copy from your computer to some other computer, and you want to do it over the wire. So you don't want somebody to just like sniff on what you're transferring. That way, then they would have like all of the information. So what you do is you encrypt the data that you're sending from your server to the other server. So that way, even if they're sniffing, they would just see like some random bits of information.
Oh, so that's SSH.
Right. So whenever you're communicating with any external server, which is away from you, which happens over the wire, which is over the internet, you want to be encrypting it.
If it's like with the MIT license, why does it matter?
Well, that's for your source code.
Oh, so nobody messes up the original.
No, not even that. Like sometimes you just want to like transfer some data from that computer to your computer, and that's not MIT, right?
Okay.
You want to copy like some credentials from one computer to another computer.
And if we're working on industrial apps, we're not going to be using the MIT license, right?
Yeah, exactly. If you're working in a company, it's not MIT.
Okay.
What type of license do they generally? Do they have their own licenses? Like they have.
If it's a privately owned company, then you don't really need a license.
You don't need any license at all.
Unless you're selling the software to somebody else.
Uh-huh.
Then it's like I forget the kind of license. It's like if it's a software as a service, then they don't even see the source code. You're just paying for the application. You're not paying for the source code. So you don't have a license for software.
Oh.
But you have to make sure like your proprietary software. It's a proprietary software, right? So there's no license for it. But you have to make sure that the code libraries that you're using are not what are they called? GPL licenses.
GPL, which is
like I forget what it stands for.
You gotta pay them or something.
It's like stands for the general public GNU public license. So GNU basically is like the free. Remember we spoke about Richard RMS, Richard Stallman, the guy who wrote Emacs. Yeah, so he invented this thing, and he's like every library can be like basically have this license. But if you're using this license, you have to make sure your code is also licensed as this. That means everybody can see your source code. So you cannot use any software which is licensed as this, and you are proprietary. So it's basically a way to ensure that if you're using free software, that you are also giving away the source code. Yeah.
well,
So free as in like source code, not as in cost. So when I say something is free, I don't mean that I'm not going to pay anything for it. I just mean I want to be able to see what is inside of it. You see the difference?
Yeah.
It's-
It allows people to be able to build upon things that's gonna make money.
so what's stopping people from
No.
owning it?
Yeah, because it's licensed. So you can't just randomly be like, oh, I'm just going to take that thing and build my own. What it is basically like I can see what the contents of it are. So I can trust the software that it's not doing something malicious. That is the intention. Right? Like, for example, all of your phone software, you have no idea what's in there because you can't see the source code. They could be like, sending all of your information to CIF or, they probably are.
Probably, actually.
Facebook.
Even though you're paying for it, right? Even though you're paying for it, you actually have no clue what is actually happening under the hood, right?
Mhm.
So what this tries to warrant for is like you pay for software, but you know exactly what is happening under the hood.
Yeah, we pay for a tracking device.
It's an end user agreement that you just like swipe.
Right.
past.
Yeah.
Like, it's all in there.
But I'm still kind of confused as to why, like, if you have a product,
Mhm.
right, like a valuable product, and you're selling that,
Mhm.
and your source code is just on GitHub in a
Mhm.
public repo.
Yeah.
Why can't other companies just be like, oh, git clone?
They can. But like if you're smart and you invented that piece of software, you're probably in better hands to actually develop and like improve on it than have somebody else work on it.
So, yeah, the benefit is that they have a better solution.
Like all of the software that you're using, Postgres is open source,
Yes.
right? Node is open source. So how do people make money on if they're working full time on those things? It's because they provide support, right? They provide support on like some companies will be like, oh, I'm using Node, so I want to hire people who are awesome at Node to give me support and train my engineers or like do whatever. So there's like relationship between both the people who are giving away for free as well as somebody who is in relationship with that person who's giving away for free.
The kids at Berkeley were acting as like training to be consultants on the technology that they make. So they're like teaching other people about it, and they're gonna make money off of it.
Right.
They know it's better to do that.
Oh.
But like for example, if Tesla decided to give away all its like at least some of their patents and like they just like released it, that anybody can work on it. You can if you want, but you need to have like the engineering chops to be able to do that, right?
Yeah, it just seems crazy because like some. Yeah.
I think
It just seems like a big major corporation could just like say, all right, we're going that's a solid market. We're going to grab that from you guys and just hire.
They can, but they have whenever they write any new code, they have to release the source code for that too. That's the way the license works.
Oh, I see.
That's fine. It's the betterment for the human race if everybody like makes better stuff, but everybody gets to benefit. That's the intention.
Oh, I see.
Linux released under this license?
Linux is Linux is GPL too. Yeah, you're right.
It is like Express.
So how does like I know Linux is sort of underneath Android and
Android is not GPL. Yeah.
So how do they get away with using that source code? And
Yeah. So there's like different versions of GPL. There's like
Lawyers.
there's GPL, GPL v3. There's slight differences.
You can probably use it for like a day or an hour, something crazy.
Oh no, I think it's like you can use it for this section of your total app.
Yeah.
But that one section.
You probably can't use it anywhere where it'd be beneficial, right? But it's free.
Like this feature, you could check out what this feature is doing, but I mean, it's just one.
That's a marketing election.
Yeah, there's like a whole like can of worms here. So like you can like that's the intention though. To encourage free software. Cool.
Definitely mine out that one.
All right, so model generated by machine learning algorithms. So a model is nothing but a JSON file, right? A JSON file which has like a bunch of key, like properties and some values. And what your algorithm, so for example, let's say you're computing what is the probability that this person is going to, get into an accident or something. So that is basically for this person, there would be all of these different there would be a JSON file which has like different configurations, different properties for each of the things that they consider important. So like age could be something, and they call it weights, right? So each property has a certain weight. So the age could be a factor, and as you get as you get much older, there's a higher probability of getting into a car accident, right? Something like that, or like so there's like properties and weights for each of those things, and then you have an algorithm which just combines all of those different numbers and gives you a final probability.
Oh no, what I was saying is like once you get from the machine learning is all done and spit out a model, how would you take that model then and reincorporate it into your backend store?
Yeah, so it would just be a JSON file.
Oh.
So you just require the JSON file and there's your model.
And you run new user data through it, so it'd be one in a table or whatever of the user and they have all the information and you just run all that against that JSON file.
Yeah.
Somehow.
So you would combine all of the information of that user against this JSON file, and you merge it together and you get a number back. That is your answer.
Oh, okay. That's part of probability. Wait. Okay.
Yeah.
You can string probably multiple of these to an app, right?
Yeah, you can have each user could potentially have their own model, right? Some of them are that
for investment portfolio.
Yeah, investment portfolio. Yeah, or I'm sure Facebook has a model for each user too, right? Like each user has their own behavior. And
Oh, you gotta supply content and then based on
Mhm.
behavior, like.
And then each user will have different weights for, yeah, I don't know. Things can get super
It
complicated.
seems like.
Was that the question you had?
Yeah, I just was like, I was just seeing Mystify, okay, you get this magic model and it just solves like your problem. So where does it
Right.
go? Like, do you put it in Postgres? Do you like?
So sometimes you have a model service too. Like, so the companies that I worked on before, where did it go? Companies that I worked on before, like we had a separate service, which is just the modeling service.
Mhm.
So it was an HTTP server,
Mhm.
which exposed the JSON files as an HTTP service.
Oh, okay.
So the other application would call out to this HTTP service to say, give me the probability for this. And here's the, so it's kind of like, the remote function thing that I was saying. So you have a remote function which lives in the model service, and it needs all of the arguments are like all of the information about the user, like age, sex, and, country or whatever, right? Like all these different time of day, time of month, and that goes into the model service, and the model service computes like the answer based on all of the information, and then returns a number back.
Oh, okay, and then you use your app to do something with that number to give yes or no.
Right.
Okay.
So then the model, like the data science team has their own sort of service. They can maintain their own service. They can deploy and change the models at their own wish, and all that has to happen from you as a developer. Is just make sure you're calling out to that service.
Okay, so okay, great.
So separating a concern. So this kind of architecture is called microservices architecture. Where each service is its own thing. It's its own service. And you're communicating over HTTP.
What interplanetary file system? That crazy is.
Cool. Is there anything else? Anybody think of anything in the last 9 more minutes? Good. Right. Cool. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Well, Farley.
Right.
Yeah, with verification, you just add in the user object, you just add another column.
For verification?
Yeah.
What do you mean?
Just add another column saying what type of verification or level of
What do you mean by verification?
authorization. There we go. Level of authorization.
Yeah. So they would have a role,
Role
and then each role would have associated actions that the role can do.
Okay.
So you divide your applications into actions.
Okay.
So user can do X, Y, Z,
Mhm.
and another user can only do X and Y. So at every point, you're going to check if the current user can do the action that they want to do. There's a what is it called? Live coding video on YouTube channel if you want to look at it.
Yeah,
It's one of the things that we did. Cool.